from the California Conventions blog. My name is Nate, alongside my partner Matthew Miranda, and we're here with Chris Patton here at FanimeCon 2019.
Hi.
Hello. So let's start off with the questions. My first question for you is that you've been voice acting since 1998.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think the industry has changed in the last couple of 20 years?
A lot. So much. I think about that a lot too. When I started in 1998, and even all the way to about the mid-2000s, things were so different. And to dub, say, a season took like 6 months. And everything was hard copy too, you know, and to see it, to like live through career-wise the evolution of, and also whenever we got comps, we got them on VHS. When I very first started doing anime. So to go through the evolutionary process of watching things go from tape to disc to Blu-ray to streaming, and things because of that taking, you know, I really feel like back then there was a lot of width, breadth, and depth that went into everything. We had time to really pour a lot into it, but now everything is about speed, and sometimes in some cases it's about simuldubbing. And with that, luckily a lot of these companies like Funimation and Sentai and Bang Zoom, they've got great teams, but no matter how great a team is, if you're being forced to do something at the speed of light, I don't know how great it can be at the end of the day. And so I don't know, I'm too tied into it all to know if the quality has changed or not, but I do know that from about 2002 to 2008, I think were some of the best dubs that have come out. And that's a whole ton of shows. Yeah. And it's not that things are bad now, it's just so much time and care is placed on expediency instead of quality or attention to detail, even with these companies who do great work.
Yeah, I've been also noticing that the dubs have been getting better also. Like since from the first time you hear animes come up from English dub all the way to like now, the dubs have been really great. And I like how the team.
It's funny, well that brings up a whole other thing. Like when I first started out in this business, I didn't know what the dubs used to sound like. And like you would be a guest at a convention, and there was a time when we were like reviled by a lot of people at conventions. It was very, very different back in those early days when there were like 20 or 30 of us that were regularly doing the con circuit. And slowly, it wasn't until the first Fullmetal Panic had come out. I was at a convention in Tampa, and this must have been summer of 2003, and this girl just walked up to me out of nowhere, and she was like, I just want to let you know that I typically hate dubbed anime. And I'm like, oh boy, where is this going? And she's like, and I'm like a sub purist and but I just watched Fullmetal Panic and someone made me watch it in English, and she said, for the first time in my life, I feel like the dub is better than the original. And I was like, well, that's amazing. I'm glad, you know, that's what but I had never heard that before. I'd always just kind of heard, oh, you're a voice actor. Like, lots of shade. It was interesting.
I remember those times too. Like, I just see a lot of people just throw shade at just the English dub. Nowadays, it's not bad. You see 2000.
Well, there was such a change that happened, like I said, in the 2000s, and I think whatever worked has been carried on at least. And yeah, the quality just changed radically. Thank goodness. Because if everyone told me that like the 90s, I don't know, apparently the 90s dubs, they would just hire like radio announcers with no acting experience. I'm like, oh, God, that's scary. Because radio announcers are great for selling copy, you know, for like having that great golden on-air voice. But if you are one, you've never trained in acting in your life, it could be really rocky. So yeah. That's my perspective on like how the business has changed.
Speaking of Fullmetal Panic, you were Sosuke for the entirety of that series. However, there was a 13-year gap between the second reign and Visible Victory.
Yeah.
What was it like getting back? Was there any difficulty, any challenges of doing something you haven't done in almost a decade plus?
It was surprising how I went into that studio on the first day, and it was interesting because I was doing it from a remote studio in North Hollywood, and there was an engineer, and there was just me in the booth with my headphones, and Mike was on the line in Dallas via Source Connect. And I was like, let's dive into this. And the first, like, how is this going to go? How is it going to be? But as soon as I said a couple of words, it all just fell back. It's weird how muscle memory works with the body, and how, like, once you start talking like that character again, everything, his cadence and his sort of emotionless emotion and his manner all just came out again. And then, especially if I got to hear Lucy's voice opposite me, like if he'd already recorded her for Konami, and I could hear some of that, it was really cool. So that's how I didn't know if it was going to be like, riding a bike, or if it was going to be stumbly and terrible. But I didn't know. I was kind of scared, but no, because like you said, it had been a long time. It wasn't just like it had been 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
It had been a minute, and I was happy with how he came back to me.
Yeah, and it seems like, just as a side note, it seems like a lot of voice actors who haven't done roles in a while, such as Sosuke, or if you look at Johnny Young Bosch, Lelouch, it's been 10 years plus.
Yeah.
It's like they maybe in a quick minute, it may take a little bit, but all of a sudden they're just back into the roles. It's so natural.
Yeah, it's so wild. It's so funny how that works. I know I was like stay on stage, someone might do a role and they revisit it 5 years later, and they get on stage and they hit their first mark, and they're like, oh yeah, and muscle memory is fascinating. It all just falls into place.
Following up with our Fullmetal Panic question, what's your favorite memory of working on that show?
Probably the way I was cast really stands out in my mind. I'd been working with the director at the time. The original director of that show was a guy named Don Rush, who just doesn't direct anime anymore. And I think he went back to commercials, but he was directing me in a show that was not fantastic called Neoranga. And I had just finished working on that, and the way he cast me as Sosuke is he played an elaborate prank on me, and he was like, I want you to be in my new show. It's called Fullmetal Panic. And like, I had been hearing about that show. I'd just been hearing, like, on the new type of done articles on it or whatever. I'm like, oh wow, okay. And he brought me in for the auditions one day, and he showed me a couple of scenes. He's like, that guy right there is that's the lead, that's Sosuke. But watch what he's gonna do here. Okay, he's interacting with this shopkeeper and this man with the hat. This guy chasing his hat down. So I want you to audition for Man with Hat. Like, oh, okay. At the time I was working on like 3 leads, and I'm like, oh, we're gonna try and humble Patton. Okay, right. And I went to audition for Man with Hat, and he goes, nah, that wasn't too good. How about doing the shopkeeper? And I'm like, oh my god. He was being so rude. He literally said that wasn't too good. And then he brings me out of the booth, and he was like, he goes, how did you feel about that? And I was like, well, yeah, fine, that's good. And he goes, well, that's cool, because I want you to play Sosuke the lead. And I was like, you asked me to do this whole thing. Yeah.
It's such a trust for that one. I'm like, why am I just voicing for this guy?
I know. And I was just like, okay, you got me done. But yeah, that's one of my favorite memories, is just that.
All right, cool. So let's talk about your work in a company that just ended like a long time ago. AD Vision.
Yeah.
AD Vision, which evolved into AD Films.
Right.
2009, the films that we remember were liquidated, and the titles have been dissolved. Do you know what your day-to-day life was knowing that this was happening? And what was it like in the early days with Funimation after the closure?
So first, I had started working with Funimation long before that happened. And that's kind of the benefit of I started working for Funimation in 2004. In fact, that's when I recorded Greed. But it's just people think of Fullmetal Alchemist as later because of Brotherhood.
Yeah.
But the original Fullmetal we recorded in the spring of 2004, I remember. But no, we built up a relationship just by going to cons with Dallas people and stuff. Like, yeah, we started getting invited to do roles. Me and Lucy and Monica and Vic and Greg and Chris and that whole group of us started to get invited over to Dallas, and vice versa. It was kind of trading off. And at that time, ADV was still the big kahuna, the big boss on the block, right? And then, but I got to tell you, the question about, how was it when it happened in day-to-day life, most of us weren't that surprised, because we had seen, when you're there, we were there all the time. Like, that was when we couldn't leave that building without getting booked for more work. In fact, I always tell people, I said, there was this crazy time in my life, I think it was the summer of 2004, where I was concurrently voicing 17 shows.
All in like one period or like one.
This was just
like
that was what was that thing? Both ADV and Funimation had these giant catalogs, and they were just trying to burn through them, and like to do one A title, you had to dub 3 or 4 C or D titles, and like there were like the 30 of us that were just in all of them,
Literally worked you out.
Oh yeah, I mean there was a time when I was working at ADV 5-6 days a week, 6-7 hours a day, like a full-time job. I was making a ton of money, but being there that much, you start to sense things and you start to notice things going wrong. And like, I remember all of a sudden people just getting laid off left and right. I would come in and every day a new person was fired, and I'm like, not actors, but like everyone in administrative and supportive staff and everything. And we're like, what is going on? And then directors started to get fired, and we were like, what the hell? They can't fire us because we're 1099. They can say we don't want to work with them anymore, but we were just like, well, what in the world? And so we knew something was up, and plus, if you have your ear to the ground, you start to hear whispers of certain things and about certain things, and I'm like, what the hell? But I will say, when the final hammer came down, it was pretty amazing, and just all the publicity it got, and it was very sad because that's how a lot of us got started in the business. Yeah, it was sad.
So looking at your bio and everything you've done, I've noticed that you haven't jumped into directing yet as an ADR director.
Not as an ADR director, and I got to tell you, I have a couple of things about that. I'm a theatrical director, and I love directing for the theater. And for years, I tried to annoy people into letting me direct from the booth. Well, finally, I live in Los Angeles now, but last March is when I left, and I remember I went up for my last gig at Sentai before I left, and the guy who ran it was like, Chris, are you sure about leaving for LA? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, okay, I've got a whole bunch of stuff coming up here, and I'm gonna want you to start directing. And I was like, why did you not say that to me 3 years ago, like when I was begging you for directing jobs? But that's just the way it goes sometimes. And he was like, I've got a ton of stuff here, and he's like, maybe you should reconsider. I'm like, I'm leaving. And now, since I've left, Sentai has finally, I think, really started to come together as a company and start to do some good stuff and some consistent stuff. And I'm in LA, and in LA, trying to direct in the booth there is like trying to break through the vanguard, because there's people that are 50, 60 years old who don't want to give up their positions. Yeah. They've been doing it for 20 or 30 years. Like, who are you? So I don't know. I would love to direct. I've sub-directed a couple of times for a couple of Colleen Thinkabir at Funimation, but I would love to. I would love to do it. It just hasn't fallen into place yet. Yeah.
I have another question. Are you a Game of Thrones fan?
Mm-mm.
Okay, because I wanted to ask you, find
Fair
out.
question, because it seems like most people are. I'm one of those few people that I'm not.
Because I wanted to relate it really quick with Fullmetal Alchemist, because with Fullmetal Alchemist, the original series was completed before the manga was ever completed.
Oh, funny. Same with Game of Thrones.
With Game of Thrones, but then now we have Brotherhood, where Brotherhood was the full completion. The completion.
Right.
And so I wanted to look at it as more of, how did you feel about that when we first had the original, and then all of a sudden there's this remake that came out?
I didn't know why that was happening.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I didn't know Brotherhood. I didn't know. There's so much we don't know. I didn't know that the original Fullmetal didn't follow the manga exactly, or didn't follow the manga, and I didn't know that there was a new one being done to fall in line with the manga. But I just know that I got this call, and they're like, we want you to come record Greed for the new Fullmetal. I'm like, what is the new Fullmetal? Then after the fact, I started discovering, well, that's really cool. That's good. And I get why some people prefer Brotherhood over the original. I like the original, but I get why, because I'm sure, what's his name, that author, I'm sure his people who were fans of the book first probably are really up in arms right now, I would guess. And they would probably love it if Game of Thrones was properly ended. There's already people talking about it online. You're like, well, who's going to direct the correct ending Game of Thrones? Yeah. And I'm like, oh my god. So I think it's kind of cool that they did that with Brotherhood. I mean, you could cynically argue it was a money grab, but it was also, I think, for the people who wanted to see it follow the manga.
Well, and the other thing too was that completed Fullmetal Alchemist, and it got high appraisal.
Oh yeah, no, people love Brotherhood. Yes. They love it. Yeah.
Another question I have is, you voiced Keima in The World God Only Knows. I have one simple question. If you were King of Shoes, who would you ultimately pick as the one?
I don't know. Who did, I feel so bad for having to ask this, but who did Brittany Karbowski voice?
Let's check.
Because that's who it would be. Just because I really like Brittany Karbowski as a human being, and she's cool and funny. And also, my characters that I play like that keep having these roles where they take care of her, like in Air. And then in World God Only Knows, I feel like it was the same kind of, or it almost becomes like more of a big brother type of situation and a caretaker situation rather than anything hyper romantic or something.
I believe the character you're looking at is Kanan Nakagawa.
Is that her name?
Yeah, Kanan.
Yeah.
Yeah, she
Okay,
was-
I'm gonna be the thing. Here's some candid confessional for you. Like, part of the suffering, a part of the detriment that occurs because of the way anime is produced now is back in the day, people could ask me, like, if you asked me about shows I worked on before like 2008, there's so much more I can tell you because we spent time on those shows. Now, you can go in and record a whole season of a show as the lead in 3 days. But I mean, you don't get to, like, when I did, I don't know, Super Gals, like I knew all the characters in that show, but when you're doing it these speed waves that we're doing it now, you really only have time to know your character and the direct people he's talking with. And there were so many girls, like characters in that show that were great, and I don't remember so many of them because, like, for Goddess Arcs, we did that like lickety split, like it was lightning fast, and I'm like, I feel like Kama just came in and out of my life in a flash. So you don't get to know the shows as well, which kind of sucks. Which is, then like, you're like, okay, I'm gonna watch this when it comes out, and then you never have the time to watch it when it comes out, and so.
I feel quite guilty of that one, because I know like there's some good animes that are out. It's just that I don't have the time.
The time, and that's another thing is back in the day, not only did we spend more time working on these, we got free copies and we'd watch all of them, and like, I don't know, now everything is just so.
Like it's like we have to actually do.
Yeah, it's like cranking stuff out.
Yeah. Another question is, you're Turles in the Dragon Ball franchise. Dragon Ball is now hitting 25 years.
That's silly, crazy.
How does it feel to be part of that amazing franchise?
Oh, I mean, that's, it's like all I am is a tertiary villain in one of the movies, and then luckily he keeps popping up in the video games because I keep making money off of them. But even to be that sort of a tertiary villain, people love him as a villain, and to be a loved or whatever hated villain in a franchise that big is a great gift, and it's something so weird to be a part of. Like when since I can say that I was a 4-episode character in Pokemon who got to teach Ash, catch him how to fight like a ninja, to be able to say that you're part of anything that big. Like Fullmetal, Pokemon, and Dragon Ball are all like things that people who don't even know anything about anime, they know those titles, so it's a great honor to have that on your resume, or to be able to say, I voiced something in that, and I'm not Chris Patton, I didn't voice 12 characters in it, but I voiced one cool one. Yeah. No, it's great. I love that I can say that.
You were Graham Spector in Baccano, and I feel that a lot of Baccano is like one of those low-key anime series that people really forgot about. Yeah. But if you watch it, it's so good.
I know.
How would you describe Baccano to a fan who's never heard of that series?
Oh, I would say that it's, for the most part, it's hyper realistic, and it takes place in like the 30s. In Chicago and New York. It's very like gangster. I've never seen an anime like that was so stripped of. Usually, if an anime takes place in an historical period, there's something really magical going on, or something supernatural. And Baccano is just so like, it's like gangsters and it's like Guys and Dolls. Like it's like Guys and Dolls the anime, but with no singing. And it's really gritty and well drawn. I think it's such a shame. Whenever I talk to other actors who are in that show with me, I just think it's such a shame it wasn't bigger. And it had all that, like Tatum's in it, and like you got all the Funimation Vanguard, and it's beautiful to look at. I don't know. I think it's a great show.
We're right out of time.
Yeah, I think we're
Are we?
running out of time.
Yeah, well anyways, well thank you very much, Chris.
No,
for-
thank you so much.
Thank you.
We still have time, guys. We still have time.
Just kidding. Just kidding.
Oh, we
Oh,
got
sure.
Go ahead.
So you have some minor involvement with Ava. I mean, seeing Ava evolve over the years, you were pretty much with like Seal and everyone behind the scenes. What do you take on the evolution of Ava from the original series to the remix or the rebuilt, I should say?
I've not seen any of the Ava stuff. I know that show keeps entering my life in some way or another, like it does with all of us. It finds a way to creep in. Like since before I started voicing anime, I had friends who were in the original dub, who got me, who were like, you need to go work for this company, ADV. I'm like, well, what have you done for them? They're like, this show called Neon Genesis Evangelion, and they would show me on VHS tapes. They'd put it in, and like they would show me parts of it. I'm like, what is this? And they're like, this is Evangelion. And I was like, oh wow. And then yeah, so Matt Greenfield does a redub in like 2004 or 5, and cast me as the Seal. That was weird. And then, I mean, I'll be honest with you, the thing that I associate Ava with now is continual recasting of actors, and how, I mean, it must be so frustrating if you're a big fan of like the 98 dub, because so many people have been replaced, or like you know, Lou Temple is a Hollywood horror actor. Some people, I think a couple people have passed, and some people just don't do anime anymore. But then like Funimation, I don't know, like didn't Greg Ayers get recast? Like, I mean, it was such strange choices have been made with that show. That and the other thing that I think of when I think of Evangelion is my friend Jan Scott Fraser, who she was an animator in Japan, and she shared office space with the director, and she was like, you have no idea the stories, I could tell. And I'm like, what? And she has told some stories, and she's like, yeah, just wild times with a wild guy. And I'm like, yeah, all right. She's told stories. She has a panel called "An Evening Wasted with Jan Fraser," and she tells stories about just that experience. So that's what, to me, Ava is this big mythological, odd thing that exists in the anime world, and it just seems to keep going, and new iterations and new casts. That's my thoughts on Ava.
Following up on that real quick, do you believe in the Ava curse?
No. I'm very non-superstitious. I say Macbeth in theaters, and I don't believe in but what I do believe is in something in magic or the occult that's called egregores, and egregorical energy might be that, like, well, for example, astrology. So many people believe in it collectively that the thought on the egregore is that, like, all that energy of someone believing in something kind of manifested on some plane. So if there are Ava curses and stuff like that, I think it's because so many people believe in something and focus on it that they either they matrix things, or that it becomes manifest, like I said, on some level. So I shouldn't really say, it's like saying I'm an atheist, and the truth is I'm really not an atheist. I just have a very non-traditional belief in a higher power, I guess. But no, yeah, maybe I do. Maybe I do believe in it in a way. Yeah, because human beings are weird people and life is weird. So, yeah.
And then following up from your theater, like how, from anime to theater, it's so interesting to see that you have...
Well, theater was first.
Oh, theater.
Since I was 9.
My mistake.
No. And it's like that for a lot of us. Theater is first. I just had really begun to neglect it for so many years because anime was so good to me, and I was like, not only was I in tons and tons of shows, but like I said, I think this marks like my 124th convention. But that's because from the years like 2003 to 2010, we just were hammered with con appearances, and between the cons and the work, I love theaters. My first love, but I had no time for it. And since I have more time, and I demanded more time of my life, I've gone into, what is new is directing theater. I never did that before. So yeah, once things had calmed down with voiceover some, and I was free at night at least, I was like, I want to direct theater. Yeah.
Okay, following up from my question is like, from theater to anime and then directing theater, there. How about did you come across Green Day's American Idiot one?
Oh, so I saw, I remember when that was still in development, and the guy who directed Spring Awakening was going to be an idiot. I'm like, oh my god, what? That could be really great or really terrible. And I saw the national tour in Dallas, and I was like, when the rights to this become available and it can be directed regionally, I'm gonna get my hands on this, and this is so arrogant, and I don't mean for it to be, just I have a director's kind of brain, and I was sitting there in the show, there's all these things that aren't working for me, and I was like, if I could direct the show, I would fix da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And so as soon as it became available, I pestered this theater company that's practically in my backyard. I was like, get the rights, I'm gonna direct this, I'm gonna direct the shit out of this show. And they were like, okay, and I ended up it won all these awards, and it was kind of changed the direction of that theater when I directed it for them, which was cool, and not just because of me. No, I like rock theatricals, period. I like musicals based on rock music, and it's so hard to find that, real rock music, not just musical theater music that sounds sort of rockish, but I mean actual rock music in theater is so hard to find, and that was one of them. And I was like, I was just bound and determined to direct it. So that's how that happened. Yeah.
Have you seen any of the Shinkai titles?
What now?
Maruko Shinkai?
Oh, I'm
Your Name.
in one.
Yeah, you're Hiroki in Place Promise in the early days.
God, you remember his name. I think his work is so beautiful and interesting. And I've seen, I've seen a couple. So beautiful and sad and melancholy. But I remember back in the day, it was such a big deal that he was just using a MacBook to animate everything. And I guess that's how he kept working, but I love the look of his stuff.
No, yeah, because that's out of everything next to Your Name. Place Promise was my favorite.
Yeah, I think Place Promise is gorgeous and so sad.
Yeah,
I love it.
It's so melancholy.
We're at time.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Anyway, yeah, I love Shinkai.
Oh,
All right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I don't thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, again,
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Very much.
Nice to meet you.